Hi, it's Wendy Olsen here at University of Manchester, and I'm very happy to be presenting a poster to you today. I've got about 10 minutes, so I'll share my screen, but really welcome. It's winter time and we're just, trying to enjoy life. So we have done an analysis of women in invisibilized childcare work in India, and it's a glimpse of some work in progress, which is really looking very promising. We would eventually use a structural equation model because the relationships between paid work and unpaid work are so complex. But at the moment, we've started to look at the unpaid work measures using the Indian Time Use Survey. So our objectives were to look at how much childcare was being carried out in 2019 in minutes per day and by whom. And do the gender-related social norms tend to coincide with women doing less childcare? And the answer to that one is yes. So we have really interesting results. So I'll start with gender norms and share with you some information from the Asian Barometers Survey 2019. In this survey, people were asked to give their opinion about questions like, if you could only have one child, would it be preferable to have a boy rather than a girl? And their agreement or disagreement with that was recorded as a Likert scale. So our poster is showing no difference in those answers between men and women among the adults in that huge survey. And whilst there was no gender difference, there were differences regionally, which are rather interesting, but the sample size is a little bit too small to read too much into that. So we have the wording of the questions here for you to look at. When a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law come into conflict, even if the mother-in-law is still in the wrong, the husband should persuade his wife to obey his mother. This question is obviously double-barreled and should be criticized, or perhaps even omitted. But we did use it to make a factor along with the other two, the one about having a boy or a girl, and the question, women should not be involved in politics as much as men. So in India, about 40% of respondents actually either agreed or disagreed with each of these, and it was usually the same people coming on the same side of that question. So the index is quite coherent. Shown in blue in figure 2 is a gender norm index framed from, in a sense, averaging those three questions, converting them from ordinal to continuous. So the more progressive attitudes are shown at the right, diverging from the mean, which is 0. And the people who took the traditional view that men should be in politics and it's better to have a boy than a girl would be shown here at the left with around a -2 on the scale. And it's a Z scale, so it does go up to +2 on the other side. So a difference of 1 is 1 standard deviation in that scale, or a little more. So we built this index, and then we went to the other data set, the India Time Use Survey data set. If you please see table 1, the average time spent on childcare is 176 minutes among women. That's 3 hours a day on the recall day. And among men, of course, it was much, much less, 20 minutes, giving an average of 100 minutes. Now, among the childcare tasks, there was tutoring and traveling with the child and other unnamed childcare tasks, but also cooking. So I have allowed cooking in a household that has children in it to all constitute cooking for children. I think that seems reasonable, but I welcome feedback on this research, and using the Indian Time Use Survey, then, women's childcare work vastly outweighs men's. But the intriguing thing is that if we make a demographic model of childcare work, just looking at the number of children and the types of people in the household, then we get a good fit. We get a starter fit, so if you like, a structural fit. And then we can add the gender norms issue to the regression. And we find that the people with the more progressive norms, or those who are in groups which have progressive norms, do more childcare time by almost an hour per day. That's a big difference and quite a large coefficient. Now, it might be misspecified, so let's look a little bit at this regression. I have most of the results here. I have left out the state indicators, which are too numerous to present here. So first, gender. The constant for the regression is 295 minutes, and it's negative. And then if you're female, then it comes back up by 300 minutes. So you have this huge female coefficient. And then the younger women did more childcare than the older people. The base case here is below 36 years old. And then people with more children did more childcare. So it's just a very obvious, simple structural demographic model. And I did use the square of the number of children in the household to allow for some reduction in the per capita childcare time as the size of the household grows. I also allowed for the number of adults and whether they had someone in the household working as a teacher or in a computer-related occupation. And these effects were really small. On the other hand, when we come to the social groups, again, we had small effects. And compared with that, the gender norm association was really large at 56 minutes. So what is going on here? If you had time to fit 2 regressions, then you might predict the amount of time they spend on paid work, and that may be negatively correlated with the time spent on childcare, simply because you haven't got enough time in your day. It's the dual burden. And so those who are doing paid work may not have done as much childcare. And interestingly, we may find that those are among the people with less education or lower incomes who are forced to do less childcare and have to go out to work. On the other hand, it may be in the higher income groups that the progressive attitudes are held and less time is spent on outside work and more on childcare. We're not quite sure, so we must do those 2 regressions. This regression is just a regression of childcare time in minutes. So look at it again and look at the T statistics. It's table 2. The T statistics are a little bit extreme in the first row because the men's and the women's fit is so different. And one might even consider taking men out. But when we put women at the center of a feminist analysis of childcare, we don't take the men out because we want to consider what kind of situations are there in which men do a lot of childcare or cooking. And so we keep them in and look for that. For example, Delhi is one of the states which appears quite unusual. It has the more progressive gender norms, and it has a very high average level of education. The progressive gender norms, I'm going to go back to show you that again. In the blue slide of the norms index, the progressive norms were associated with higher education levels, including secondary education. So in fact, it reached those high levels just with secondary education and persisting up through higher education and not going up any further. On the other side, the more traditional values were held among people who had, if you like, some people say no education, people who were recorded as illiterate and didn't have primary completed and primary. So on the left-hand side are a lot of people who had low education levels, and it needs to be looked at how that affects their paid work time, and then the paid work time may feed into this. So this number, 56 minutes per standard deviation of the gender norms index, that might be, biased. It may change when we make a structural equation model with a path diagram, but it's a really good start, an interesting pointer. So let me summarize then, because I have finished with my presentation. I've been working with Jihye Kim and Sonny McCann at the University of Manchester to look at the gender norms in India. And we found that the gender norm was associated, if it was progressive, with doing more childcare work. And it is in fact also associated with higher levels of education. So it could be that people who have the luxury of being at home more in the daytime would do more childcare work and more cooking time. And those who are going out to work may do less childcare work. Now, this could involve less minutes, but being responsible for as much childcare, but just doing it in a more compact way in order to make time for doing paid work. So we have a regression of childcare, but it appears that it may be confounded by the activities in the paid labor market. And that's the next part of our project, is to bring that equation into this as a structural equation model. So thank you very much. I hope you'll send some feedback to us. Jihye Kim has already published a couple of papers, which I can just point out here in the references. One paper is in Work, Employment and Society in 2022, and one paper in Development and Practice in 2023, and there's a paper in Child Indicators Research. And all of these have really been looking at the work done by children. But this is the first time we've looked at childcare work by adults. And we'll also be looking soon at childcare work by children, which is a significant amount of time as well. Well, thanks a lot. Bye-bye for now. Enjoy the conference.